Some business trips, TDY, temporary duty, can be interesting and exciting. But this was not one of them. It was 30 days of almost round-the-clock intense work. Every year, the U.S. Army participates in rapid deployment exercises. Several units from all branches of the Army are selected to participate, and they are flown to Germany with all their equipment where they spend a month conducting exercises with their NATO colleagues. My name is Fred Sadler. At the time, I was a relatively new captain in the U.S. Army and worked in the operations department stationed at Fort Hood, Texas. This deployment came at the worst possible time for me, as I couldn't be home with my wife, who was pregnant and due to give birth during my deployment. I tried to resign from the service, but the Army wouldn't accept my decision. Lydia and I had been married for almost 6 years. Most of that time was good. The bad times came when I was away on assignment and she was home. Lydia and I weren't lovers or lifelong friends. We met at the DMV when I was registering my car. She was renewing her driver's license. We sat next to each other, waiting for our license plates to be called, and started talking. One thing led to another, and soon we exchanged phone numbers. A week later, we had our first date, and a month later, our first night together. Lydia wasn't a stunning beauty, but she had a classic look that made my heart skip a beat. She could just look at me and my heart would melt. Her body was classic too. Most men pay attention to any woman with a beautiful body, and I saw how men and women looked at her when she walked by. At first, I felt proud when I saw their glances, but over time it became tiresome. I began to think of them as leeches who saw her only as a sexual object. I realized that I would have to put up with it. Lydia, on the other hand, was calm about it. "Let them look, dear," she would say. "It's no big deal. As they say, you can look, but it's better not to touch." Of course they won't touch, I would think every time she said that. She worked very hard to make her body look the way it did. I helped her with that. We went to the gym 3 times a week, ran in the park, went hiking, and even watched what we ate. I couldn't even remember the last time I had eaten red meat. Watching her get dressed, or even better, undressed, was always a fascinating sight for me. Every time she casually threw off her clothes, revealing part of her body, my heart skipped a beat, and I never got tired of it. When mobilization began, I heard my commander say, "I personally guarantee that I will do everything possible to get you home before the baby is born." And he kept his word. He arranged everything so that at the end of the training, I boarded the first plane back to the States. I packed my things and was about to board the plane. I called Lydia, who told me that she was going to be admitted to the hospital in the next few days. "Then everything worked out perfectly, because I'm already on my way home," I told her. We ended the conversation with "I love you." It was sunset. I was driving to the airport and a deer ran out onto the road. The driver swerved to avoid hitting it, and the next thing I remember is waking up in a military hospital in Frankfurt. My right arm and right leg were broken. I had 3 broken ribs and my right lung was collapsed. I was so stunned that I didn't know who I was or where I was. Gradually coming to my senses, I started asking questions. "How long have I been here?" I asked the nurse. "5 days. Is my wife here?" "No, sir." "Where is she?" "She wasn't here, sir, but your commander informed her immediately after your arrival, so she knows what happened." "Where's my cell phone?" "She found it among my personal belongings, and I called Lydia." "Are you okay?" were her first words. "Never mind that. How are you and the baby?" She cried. "We lost the baby, Fred. I'm so sorry." I was too stunned to speak. Finally, I asked, "Are you okay?" "I think so. I'm at home, but they won't let me go, otherwise I would be with you." "What happened?" I asked. "No one knows for sure. Everything seemed fine until I heard one of the nurses say, 'Oh,' and then everyone started rushing around. I still don't understand anything, but they tried to explain that it was something to do with the umbilical cord." "Are you sure you're okay?" I asked. There was a long pause as we both struggled with our thoughts and emotions. "Physically, I'm fine, but emotionally, I'm devastated." "When will you be home?" "I don't know. They haven't told me anything." "Do you want me to try to come?" "No, no. Stay there and take care of yourself." 2 weeks later, I was flown home on a medevac plane. Lydia met me and drove me to Fort Hood Hospital. She was still upset, but the time we spent together helped us both. I asked her if she had named the baby. "Yes, I named her Hope." Hearing those words, we both cried. I stayed in the hospital for another 2 weeks, after which I was discharged with limited duties. Limited duties usually meant no field duty and no training. It was very difficult because my arm and leg were still in casts. It was several more weeks before they were removed. Time passed, and everything in our marriage and my career was going smoothly. 2 years after the loss of our child, we were transferred to Heidelberg, Germany. We spent 3 years there, traveling throughout Europe. There, I was promoted to major. After 3 years, we were transferred to Fort Lewis, Washington. As majors, we were assigned field-grade officer housing. It was much better than company-grade officer housing and had garages instead of just carports. Company grade included second lieutenants, first lieutenants, and captains. Field grade included majors and above. When we moved into the house in Lewis, all the things we had taken with us to Germany were sent back. We unpacked those boxes, as well as the boxes we had stored and not taken with us. The boxes were stacked in every room. Lydia went to the officers' club for a newcomers meeting. There she could meet other wives and make new friends. While she was at the club, I stayed in our cottage and unpacked our things. With a box cutter, I opened one of the many boxes and began taking things out of it. It was the same box we had kept our things in while we were in Germany. About halfway down the box was a small wooden box that I hadn't noticed before. I put it on top of the box and opened it. My life changed forever. There was a small stack of envelopes tied with a pink ribbon. I removed the ribbon and took the top envelope. It was unsealed, and I opened it. Inside was an official document labeled birth certificate. When I looked at the document, my mind went blank. It stated that a baby girl weighing 7 pounds 6 ounces and measuring 19 inches had been born alive, and the date was indicated. It was the same date Lydia had told me our baby had been stillborn. The girl was named Hope. It went on to say that the mother's name was Lydia Jane Sadler, née Johnston. The father's name was listed as unknown. At the bottom of the certificate were 2 tiny ink footprints. Staggering, I literally fell onto the sofa and stared at the document for a long time. Leaving it on the sofa, I got up and went over to the stack of envelopes. I took the next envelope. It was also unsealed. I took out a multi-page document. It was an adoption certificate. I read it several times. The gist of it was that a child named Hope, born to Lydia Sadler, had been given up for adoption and deprived of all parental rights. The document went on to state that since the identity of the biological father is unknown, his consent is not required. It also stated that the name and location of the adoptive family must remain confidential, and that the adoptive family and Mrs. Sadler had no right to contact each other. I looked through the rest of the documents, and most of them were letters from me. I was in complete shock. It was the biggest lie in the history of lies. I couldn't stop asking questions. Things like this don't happen overnight, they have to be planned. Or so I thought. If she thought I was going to be at the birth, then she must have been planning the adoption. The father is unknown. If I wasn't the father, then who was? Obviously, even she didn't know. We had been married for 6 years. How many men had she slept with during that time? Did she know? The thought made me feel uncomfortable. I managed to pull myself together and put everything in order. I even repacked and sealed the box that contained everything. As I was sealing the box, I saw the words, Lydia's documents and childhood memories, written in marker on all 4 sides. If I had seen that, I definitely wouldn't have opened the box. She must have known that. Even in marriage, we need personal space and time to think. I rearranged a few other boxes and put this box between them, trying to pretend I hadn't noticed it. I went out to the backyard to get some fresh air because it was stuffy in the house. What should I do now? How can I even talk about this? I was confused. I had no idea where to go or how to get there. I needed advice. If I went to my parents, they would explode and try to kill Lydia. I was their only child and therefore their only hope. I realized the irony of the situation, their hope for a grandchild. I could have gone to her parents, but that prospect didn't inspire optimism. We didn't have any close friends. Moving around for military service and meeting new people had taken a toll on our family and friendships. When she came home, I was still there. She found me on the street. "Hello, dear." She kissed me on the cheek. "How much have you done?" "Enough," I replied rather sharply. I was rarely laconic or sharp when talking to her, so I felt her looking down on me. She stood there for a few more minutes and then went into the house. Another hour or so passed before I went inside. Lydia's box of papers and childhood memories was gone. "We've been invited to a meeting at the Welcome Wagon on Saturday." "Okay." The Simpsons from Heidelberger here. Do you remember them? Not really. He was a G2 major, and I used to play bridge with her. Their names were Jim and Fran. Oh, yes, I remember. She came over to me. Are you okay? Did something happen? Did something happen? I thought. Of course something happened, and I intended to find out what. No, I'm just not in the mood today, I guess. Okay. What would you like for dinner? Or would you rather go to the officers' club? I'm not hungry. I think I'll just lie down. I did just that, fully clothed, on our bed. After a while, before she joined me, I fell asleep. It must have been late because when I looked at the clock, it was already 1 in the morning. I slept until 9, which was rare for me. I took a shower and went downstairs. As expected, she had made coffee. Breakfast? She asked. No thanks, just coffee. Another rarity. I usually ate a full breakfast. She sat down across from me. Okay, something's wrong. Tell me, maybe I can help. Just a lot on my mind, I said, stood up, took my coffee to the sink, poured it out, and headed for the garage. You know I'm here if you need me, she said as I left. I drove to the golf course, parked my car, and headed for the 19th hole, where there was a bar, snack bar, and restaurant at the end of the course. I ordered 2 eggs cooked medium and corned beef hash. I even had a cup of decaf coffee, which was rare for me. It used to be my favorite breakfast until Lydia changed my eating habits. Beef in any form or under any name was absolutely unacceptable to her, but I ordered it anyway. I managed to eat almost everything and sat on the terrace until the golfers finished the 18th hole and went home. By the time I got home, it was already midday. She had made significant progress in sorting boxes and tidying up the house. I looked around and thought how great it would be to have a 5-year-old daughter running around the house. I barely made it to the bathroom before throwing up my scrambled eggs. I was still bent over the dresser when I felt her hand on my back. Suddenly, I hated her. Get your hands off me, I almost shouted, throwing my head back and throwing up another load of breakfast. I hadn't thrown up in years, not since I got drunk at my high school graduation. When I was done, I went upstairs, rinsed my mouth, and brushed my teeth. She was sitting in the living room with a napkin in her hand. It looked like she had been crying. She watched me walk past her and head back to the garage. I was backing away when she appeared in the rearview mirror. I can't help you if I don't know what's wrong, she said as I continued to back away. Seeing that I wasn't going to stop, she walked away. I walked over to my office and went inside. There was no one there except the officer on duty. I sat down at my desk and tried to work, but my heart wasn't in it. When I got home, it was already past midnight. She was lying in bed reading. I undressed and took a shower. I'm going to sleep downstairs, I announced as I left the room and closed the door behind me. I had just turned on the TV and was settling down on the sofa when she came in, grabbed the remote, turned off the TV, and stared at me. Stop talking nonsense. Tell me what's wrong, and I'll either help you or leave. What? I didn't do anything wrong, so I'm not going to put up with you yelling at me when I'm trying to help, or when I have to give way to you when you're trying to run me over. I walked over to her, took the remote from her hands, and turned on the TV. Have a nice trip, I said. Less than an hour later, she was gone. We had never spoken to each other like that before, and she had never threatened to leave, let alone actually done it. I got up and started looking for the box. I found it in the basement under several other boxes. I opened it, found a small wooden box, took out my birth certificate and adoption papers, made copies of them, and put everything back in its place. Since she was gone, I slept in our bed. On Monday morning, I talked to my commander and told him the whole story. I even showed him the documents. He was as stunned as I was. I had been under his command for less than a month, so I hadn't had time to get used to him yet. Perhaps he was worried that he had been stuck with a loser. What are you going to do? He asked me. I don't know. Did she say where she was going? No, sir. But she didn't take all her things, especially the box. I paused before continuing. I thought I'd try to find my daughter if she is my daughter, and take it from there. That's practically impossible. In adoption cases, confidentiality is very important to both parties, he said. I understand, but I have to do something. I have to start somewhere, and I no longer believe she'll tell me the truth. And then I literally jumped up. Oh my God, I have an idea. Can I take the rest of the day off? Sure. I saluted and ran out of his office and out of the building to the parking lot, where I got in my car and drove home. I opened the box, took out the wooden box, and dumped its contents on the floor. There was a pacifier. A pacifier. Hope must have used it until she was taken away. I gathered the box, put the pacifier in a clear plastic bag, and sealed it. I went online and tried to find a DNA lab in the area. There was one in downtown Seattle. I went into the bathroom, but all of Lydia's things were gone. I rummaged through the cabinet under the sink, found her old comb, put it in another plastic bag with the bag containing the pacifier, and rushed to Seattle. I handed the pacifier to a technician named Marge, and she looked at it. It's been a long time, so there may not be any DNA left, but we can try. She looked at the comb, pulled out a few hairs, and said that wouldn't be a problem. Then she asked me to spit into a bottle. We'll call you in about 3 weeks, she said. I returned to Fort Lewis and home. I didn't hear from Lydia all day. Hi, I said. Are you feeling better? Better than what? Better than the jerk you were a couple of days ago. No, I'm still the same jerk. So it's still not safe for me to come home. No, it's not safe. Try back in 3 weeks. Why 3 weeks? By then I'll know whether I'm going to kill you or just divorce you. I ended the call. At that moment, the phone rang, but I didn't answer. The next day when I got home, Lydia was already there. She met me at the car when I pulled up to the house. She was furious. What do you mean you'll kill me or divorce me? That's what I said. I think I deserve an explanation, she said. So do I. About what? She asked. We were still standing on the driveway. We weren't shouting, but we were clearly not behaving like an army officer and his wife should. So you don't need any explanation? I asked. That's exactly what I'm saying. So there's no hope for us, I said, trying to emphasize the word hope as much as possible. How can there be no hope for us? What did I do? And then she understood. Oh God, no, please, no. I'll be back in an hour. And you'd better not show up here. I'm leaving for work at 6:30 in the morning. I'll be back at 5. By that time, all your things should be out of the house. I left. I returned exactly an hour later and she was gone. So was the box and some of her things. She tried to call that evening, but after the first call, I blocked her number. The rest of the night was quiet. At exactly 6:30, I was in my car, opening the garage door. Lydia was standing in the rearview mirror again. I slowly backed up. I really wanted to run her over, but I held back. Can we at least talk? She asked as I continued to back up. Please? Her hands were on the trunk lid, and she was moving backward with the car. I didn't answer. There was a van outside with 3 men sitting in the cab. I was halfway out and the car was still moving. I saw the men get out of the van, run up to her, and pull her out from behind my car. I didn't know whether to be happy or sad. When I got home that evening, the house was almost empty. She had picked out almost all the furniture and taken it away. She did leave my favorite armchair and the guest bedroom set. She also left the everyday dishes and a few pots and pans. She took the nice silverware, china, and other things that I wasn't interested in. The next morning, I called the office to let them know I would be late. Then I called Post Housing and arranged for government furniture to be brought to my apartment temporarily. I also called the credit union, our stockbroker, insurance company, and everyone else I could think of, and went about the usual business that accompanies a divorce. Then I made an appointment with the JAG, Judge Advocate General, an Army lawyer. I knew they weren't authorized to represent me in civil court, but they could advise me. They confirmed what I suspected. She would get half. We lived in government housing, so we didn't have a house of our own, but we had enough money to buy one if we wanted to. Both of our cars were paid off. We bought them in Germany for much less than we would have paid in the US for similar cars. I went to my office. My commander talked to me for a while and told me to use all the reasonable time I had to get myself together and keep him informed of my progress or lack thereof. My life went on for a couple more weeks. I went to work, did my chores, mowed the lawn, washed and cleaned the car. One morning, the phone rang. Hello, I answered. Is this Major Fred Sadler? Yes. Major Sadler, this is Marge from the DNA Analysis Center. A few weeks ago, you sent us some samples for analysis. Yes, I did. The results are in, and you can come in and see them. Can't you tell me right now? No, sir, I can't. We can either send them to the address you gave us or show them to you in person. We can't verify your identity over the phone. We need to see your ID. See, we can send the results by mail because, as you may recall, we asked you to show us your ID when you were here, and we were able to confirm your address. I'll come in as soon as I can. I entered their office, introduced myself, and asked to see Marge. She came out and we greeted each other. She asked to see my ID. Please come with me, she said. I followed her into a small room. She asked me to wait. A couple of minutes later, she returned, handed me a pacifier, and said, Sample A is yours. Sample B is from the hair you gave us. And Sample C is from the pacifier. We have determined that samples B and C are a positive match. Sample A is not a match for either B or C. Thank you, I said, took the pacifier, put it in my pocket, took my documents, and left. I got in my car. At least I didn't have a daughter who called another man dad. But someone else did. JAG was not authorized to recommend specific law firms or attorneys, but the JAG officer I spoke with was able to provide me with a list of approved attorneys and firms. The next day, I started calling them. I set up 6 meetings. On the 3rd meeting, I found my guy. He was a retired JAG officer and hated cheating spouses, both wives and husbands. I spent over an hour telling him my story. I've been practicing law for 45 years, and this is the most devilishly unprincipled case of selfishness I've ever seen. She must have ice running through her veins instead of blood. It's a shame that the courts here almost always side with the wife, regardless of the circumstances of the divorce. I can almost guarantee that in this case, they will also side with your wife. It seems as if they consider it their duty to destroy a husband, no matter how innocent he may be. When I got home, it was late. There was a letter in the mailbox. It was from Lydia. Fred, 3 weeks have passed. Lydia short and to the point. The return address was her parents' address in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. I called her. Hi, Fred, she said. I'm not going to talk about this on the phone, and I'm certainly not flying to Pennsylvania, so I guess you'll have to come here. If you mean Seattle, I'm already here. I sent a letter last week when I was there. I'll be home at 6:30. Come by then, I told her. She hung up. I didn't prepare anything special. No drinks, no cheese, no crackers, nothing. This was supposed to be a business meeting. I put the DNA test documents, copies of the birth certificate, and adoption papers on the coffee table with the government seal. She pulled up to the house at 6:20, but waited until 6:30 to ring the doorbell. I took my time opening the door. When I did, I invited her in and showed her where to sit. I sat down on the couch. She sat down on an uncomfortable chair with a straight back across from me. I took the pacifier out of my pocket and handed it to her. She took it and pressed it to her chest. Thank you, she said, as if I had given her $1,000,000. Then I handed her a copy of the DNA test results. You already know that I'm not your father, but this will confirm it. She reached out and took the results with her left hand. The pacifier remained clenched in her right hand. I take it you're sample A? She asked. Yes. Then, without saying a word, I pushed the rest of the papers toward her. She leaned forward, read the headline on the top sheet, and tears welled up in her eyes. She put down the DNA test results and picked up the divorce papers. She started to read, but tears were already streaming down her face and dripping onto the form, so she put it down. She rummaged through her pockets for a tissue but couldn't find one. Can I have a tissue? She asked. I don't have any. It was a lie because there was a box on the nightstand next to the couch where I was sitting. She saw it and just stared at me. I didn't move. You're not making this easy for me, are you? She asked. You cheated on me, I said. She nodded. How many times? I asked. Does it matter? No, I just want to know. Once over the weekend. With different men? Only one. Who was he? Again, does it really matter? Again, I just want to know. I think I deserve that. I'm not going to tell you. Do I know him? I'm not going to tell you. So you'd rather protect him than save our marriage? She picked up the divorce papers. Our marriage is over anyway. Why ruin it? Fine, but you have to tell me why you lied about your daughter being stillborn. It was a statement, not a question. Yes, I owe you that. She stood up, took a box of tissues, and placed it in front of her. She took one and wiped her still wet eyes. She was still clutching the pacifier. When I found out I was pregnant, I wasn't sure if it was your child or his. I thought about having an abortion, but I couldn't. Over time, I realized that there was no way to know for sure whether it was your child or not. When we found out it was a girl, I became even more convinced that you wouldn't know because there's a special bond between a father and a daughter, and I was sure you and her would look alike. As the time of the birth approached, I started to get nervous. What if you found out she wasn't yours? Then you went away on a business trip and I calmed down a little. I was glad you wouldn't be there when she was born. Then you said you were flying home and I started to get nervous again. My emotions were like a roller coaster. Maybe you'll find out, maybe you won't. Maybe you'll be there when she's born, maybe you won't. I was nervous. And then she appeared, alive and perfect. They put her on my chest. I looked at her and fell in love. She was beautiful, with light hair and blue eyes. Light hair and blue eyes, she paused. Just like her father. You have brown hair and brown eyes. No one in our families has light hair and blue eyes. I knew she wasn't yours. She was my daughter, and you were my husband. I loved you both, but I knew I had to choose one of you. I chose you. The hospital staff helped me when I said I wanted to give her up for adoption. Within 24 hours, I had the papers. They asked me who the father was, and I said I didn't know. They said it would be easier that way because if I knew who the father was, they would need his consent. I just breastfed her and held her in my arms. She was sucking on her pacifier when they brought me the papers to sign. At that point, she started crying again. They took her away from me so I could sign the papers. I signed the papers and reached out to take her. The nurse said, "You can't take her. She's not yours anymore." I reached out for her anyway, but I managed to grab the pacifier before they left with her. I never saw her again. The two photos I managed to take on my phone, the pacifier, and the birth certificate are all I have left of her. Now she was sobbing. God forgive me, I want my daughter back. I sat there watching her cry for a long time, then brought her a glass of water. Thank you, she said. I sat down again. It took her a long time to calm down. I knew I had to tell you something, so I made up a story that she was stillborn and her remains were cremated. When you came home, I couldn't believe you didn't ask to see the birth certificate, death certificate, or anything else. I still can't believe it. I trusted you, I said. I had no reason not to trust you. Besides, it was so traumatic that I didn't see the point in adding to our suffering by looking at those papers. She continued. In the end, we got our lives back on track and I was almost happy, but part of me was missing. It's still missing. And every year on her birthday, it gets worse. I always made time to get out her birth certificate, touch her tiny footprints, and hold her pacifier. There were times when I wanted to put it in my mouth to feel her closeness, but it had a little bit of my dried breast milk on it and I wanted to save it, so I didn't. At that moment, she wanted to show it to me, but it wasn't there. It must have been scraped off at the DNA lab. Oh God, it's gone, she moaned, then looked at me. It's gone. Her milk is gone. You bastard, you took her milk. She fell to her knees and literally curled up in a ball on the floor. She didn't stop crying. I picked her up and sat her on the couch. I couldn't let her leave in that state, so I covered her with a blanket and went to the bedroom, but not to bed. She sat there for several hours. At midnight, I heard the toilet flush. I went downstairs. She was sitting on the couch. Would you like some coffee? I asked. Yes, please. She sat down at the bar and I made her a cup. She took a sip. I guess I've changed my mind a little, haven't I? Something like that. We sat in silence and drank our coffee. More? I asked. Yes, please, she replied. Where do you live? I asked, making two more cups. In a motel. Have you been there for more than 3 weeks? No, I've been with my parents most of the time. Do they know the truth? No, I lied to them too. I told them we were having a difficult relationship and I needed a break from you. They paid for my trip to see them. They think I came back to help work things out. Where's your motel? Not far from the post office. Actually, I should be there already. She looked around, walked over to the coffee table, took a pen out of her purse, sat down, signed the divorce papers without reading them, and left. I cleared the coffee cups and went upstairs to bed. When I woke up, it was already Sunday, mid-morning. I spent the rest of the day thinking. On Monday, I took the divorce papers to my lawyer, and he filed them with the court. I went to the housing's office and said I was moving out of the area and into an apartment outside the city. 6 months later, I was divorced. Neither the court nor I heard anything from Lydia. As a result, she got nothing except her car and everything she had taken with her. A copy of the final court decision was sent to her parents' address in Pennsylvania. I thought a lot about who Lydia had cheated on me with. She never told me who it was or how their affair began. I was angry not only that she had cheated on me and gotten pregnant, but also that she was protecting this bastard and wouldn't tell me who he was. The only thing she told me was that their affair had lasted only one weekend. Fortunately, I was so busy at work that I didn't have time to think about anything else. I also didn't have time for a social life. I became friends with one of the officers who worked with me and had dinner with him and his family at least once a week. In my imagination, they were the perfect military family. Husband, wife, 2 children, 2 cars, and a beautiful home. They had it all. Of course, as a military family, they had to move periodically, take their children out of one school and put them in another, and deal with all the other challenges of military life. Civilian families tend to grow up in the same neighborhood with the same friends, but there are exceptions. Families working in certain industries, such as oil, move just as often, if not more, than military families. In any case, Major George and Marianne Johnson seemed perfect, and I loved spending time with them and playing with their children. Their son was 10 and their daughter was 8. I don't know what typical children are like, but these two seemed perfectly happy, so I decided they were typical. One evening after dinner, George and I got talking. The conversation turned to temporary assignments, and we discussed the pros and cons. Of course, they were necessary, and we knew that, but most business trips took us away from our families, those of us who had them, and we felt that we didn't spend enough time with them to consider it a vacation. This topic came up because he had been selected to attend a 2-week safety seminar at Fort Hood. He was supposed to leave in 2 weeks. The next day, I went to our commander. "Sir, is there any reason why I can't go to the seminar instead of Major Johnson?" No, no. The general just decided that he has a little more experience in this area than you do. But if you go, everything will be fine. Okay. He and his wife are celebrating their 12th wedding anniversary, and it would be nice if they could celebrate it together. Well, Major Sadler, I didn't know you were such a romantic, he said, laughing. 2 weeks later, I returned to Fort Hood, where Lydia and I had been living when her daughter was born. Military seminars are usually quite intense, but this one was relaxed. We were divided into groups of 3 to work on a project. It turned out there were 6 groups of 3, leaving 2 of us. It was a major from Alaska and me. We hit it off almost immediately. It felt like we had known each other our whole lives. His name was Kit Franklin, and as I said, he was stationed in Alaska at Fort Wainwright, the coldest base in the U.S. Army, but he loved it there. He was a computer genius, and we were so far ahead of everyone else that we had to slow down and wait for them to catch up. On Friday of the first week, we had lunch at the O Club. He told me about his personal life. He had cheated on his wife and she divorced him. Now she lives with some civilian, and his 2 children call the other man dad. Of all the bad things that divorce brings, I've always considered the hardest to be when your children call another man dad. Towards the end of dinner, I told him my story too. When I finished, he looked at me strangely. "And you don't know who she was with?" "No, she didn't tell me." "And that was here in Hood?" "Yes." "5 years ago?" "Almost 6. Blonde hair and blue eyes?" "That's what she said." "Come with me." We went to the personnel center. Everyone who served at Fort Hood had to go through there. We walked right into the personnel director's office. She saw us, stood up, and walked around her desk to hug Keith. She was about 60 years old, and her eyes sparkled. I liked her, even though I hadn't even spoken to her yet. "Aunt Lucy, this is Fred Sadler." "Hi, Fred," she said, shaking my hand. "Hello," read the nameplate on Mrs. Healy's desk. "Mrs. Healy," I began. "Call me Aunt Lucy. Everyone does." "Aunt Lucy," Kit began. "Do you remember the blonde guy with blue eyes who worked here about 6 years ago?" She thought for a few seconds. "No, but I don't always see everyone who walks by. They all have to pass by, but that doesn't mean I see them." She thought some more. "Fred Sadler? You were here around that time, weren't you?" "I remember that name." "Yes, we were here with my wife," I said. I looked at Kit as if to ask how she knew that. Kit looked at me. "Aunt Lucy has H. Sam, and she can remember almost everything she's ever read, seen, or encountered. That includes people. She remembers everyone she's ever met." "H. Sam?" I asked. "Yes, hyperthymesia. It's a condition." "Or a curse," Aunt Lucy interjected. "Or a curse," Kit continued. "Very few people have it." Aunt Lucy is the living memory of Fort Hood, especially when it comes to personnel matters. Right, Aunt Lucy? Unfortunately, yes. I looked at her, then at Kit, then back at her. You remember everything? Everything that happens to me personally. My goodness, I said. How do you keep it all in? I don't. It's just always there. Are there any downsides to that? I asked. Oh God, yes, I remember the good and the bad. If I let myself, it can be depressing. I can imagine, I told her. Aunt Lucy, Kit interrupted us again. Fred? He pointed at me. He's looking for a man who was here at the same time. All he knows is that he was blonde with blue eyes. She laughed. That's all? No height, no weight, no rank, no assignment? Not even his initials? No, ma'am, I replied. Calling me ma'am is a waste of oxygen, Fred. I'm Aunt Lucy. Give me some time to think and maybe ask around. Is this important? Kit looked at me, and I replied, Yes, Aunt Lucy, it matters. Oh, he was about the same age as me when I was here, if that helps. And he was in the army. An officer or enlisted? I assume he was an officer since he was in the army. Then you don't even know if he served. No, I don't. Or was he a civilian employee? No, I'm sorry, I know it's not much. She laughed. There's just nothing to go on. I've met no more than 2,000 blonde, blue-eyed men in the last few years, but I'll try to narrow it down. She took our phone numbers. 2 days later, she called Keith. I've been thinking about the man you asked me about. I don't remember any blonde, blue-eyed men, either officers or soldiers around that age, but I know 2 civilian employees at the Postal Engineering Department. One of them has been working there for about 30 years, so he's probably too old. The other has been working there for about 10 years. He's in charge of new construction now, but he used to be the head of the plumbing department. His name is Kurt Weber. There are about 15 other blonde men with blue eyes, but their ages don't match, and I didn't bother trying to remember civilians who live off base because I figured that when Major Sadler was here, he didn't have time to make many civilian friends. Kit told me about this, and I immediately started planning how to meet Weber, find out if he was the man, and maybe get a little revenge. Men who prey on military wives are the second lowest form of life on the planet. The lowest, of course, are those who prey on wives while the military is overseas. Those bastards deserve the worst fate imaginable. As I said, Keith could almost read my mind. Let's take a look at this guy, he said. The first thing he did was call Aunt Lucy. Is there a legal way to find Weber's address and phone number? Of course, she replied. I have a directory of civilian addresses in my desk. 30 seconds later, we had both pieces of information we needed. I love you, Aunt Lucy, Kit told her. We got into his rental car and waited at the main post office of the Engineering Corps at 3:45 p.m. We recognized him immediately when he came out of the building. He was a good-looking guy, and I hated him the moment I saw him. He headed for his car, and we followed him to make sure he was going home. He was. We sat within sight of his house for a couple of hours. He didn't come out, but someone we took to be his wife was working in the flower bed in the yard, and 3 children, all with blonde hair, were playing around. You don't have to stay here and do this, I said to Keith. Hell, it's fun. I'm sitting here thinking about what we can do to this bastard. I've got a few ideas. We exchanged notes. The next morning, I sat in my rental car on the street next to Weber's house. I hoped he was playing golf or doing some home improvement, and maybe heading to the local hardware store or lumber yard. I sat there for almost 2 hours when I saw his car pull out of the garage and speed down the street. Thank God, I thought. I didn't want to sit there all day to see if he went anywhere, but I was prepared to do so if necessary. I followed him to Home Depot. We parked, and I followed him into the store. He was obviously familiar there because he talked to several employees. There was a coffee pot right at the entrance. I knew enough about Home Depot to realize that regular contractor customers could afford that. Weber poured himself some coffee and stood there sipping it while chatting with one of the salespeople behind the counter. As I watched Mr. Weber, I realized one thing. Not only had he slept with my wife and gotten her pregnant, but he also chewed gum with his mouth open. I couldn't think of anything more disgusting than spitting on the sidewalk. The saleswoman Weber was talking to had to help a customer. So Weber took a last sip of coffee, spat the gum into a paper cup, and walked away, opening another pack of gum. I walked over to the trash can, looked inside, and saw the paper cup with the pack of gum right on top. I looked around, saw no one, and took the cup. I got in my car and called Keith. I told him what I had. He laughed and told me to hurry up, that he might have something more interesting for me when I got there. When I pulled up, he was literally jumping up and down and waving some papers around. "You won't believe it," he said. "You really won't believe it." He grabbed my hand. "Look at this. No, sit down." I sat down. He sat down next to me and put the papers in front of me. "Now look." There were several names and an address. "So what?" I asked. "And? So this is Hope's name, her address, and her family's last name. Now her name is Sarah Randolph. I hacked into the adoption agency's files. Those files are more secure than the nuclear launch codes carried by the President of the United States." Then he paused and calmed down. "Well, I didn't hack their files myself, my brother did, but it's all the same." I laughed. "That's great, Keith, but what am I supposed to do with this?" "I have no idea, but you have information. Maybe we can blackmail someone?" "Oh, that's great." I can already see the headlines. "Two Army officers try to blackmail 6-year-old adopted daughter." Great. He threw the papers on the coffee table and leaned back in his chair. "Yeah, I see where you're going with this." He paused again, a little confused. "But we hacked their security, that's something." "Yes, that's something," I said, laughing. I picked up the papers and my coffee cup, returned to my room in the bachelor officer's quarters, and put them on the desk. I don't know why I did it, but I found out where Hope lived and drove there early Sunday morning. It was almost 200 miles to Corsicana. The house was typical of the suburbs. I sat outside for about an hour, watching a typical Sunday afternoon in an American suburb. The noise of lawnmowers, children shouting, neighbors chatting. Until noon, there was no activity at Hope's house. A car pulled up to the driveway. There were 3 people in it. A man was driving, a woman was in the front passenger seat, and a child was in the back right seat. The woman got out of the car, closed the door, and walked toward the back right door. I stood ready with my cell phone. The woman took the child out of the car seat and put him on the ground. Then she knelt down to adjust the little girl's dress. I had enough time to take a few photos. I heard a noise near the car. A woman with a child was walking by. "Sarah!" squealed the little girl sitting next to my car, and ran to another girl whom I recognized as Hope, and ran up to her. They were only a few meters away from my car, and I took a few more quick pictures. I started the car and drove away before the 2 women noticed the strange car and man parked on their street. I drove a short distance and stopped to look at the photos. 4 were absolutely perfect. I could even see her blue eyes. I returned to Fort Hood. The following week, Kit and I easily finished the course. On Friday, we received our diplomas, then had dinner and a drink. On Saturday morning, we drove to the airport and flew home. Kit to Alaska, and me to Seattle. The following Monday was a school day, so I had the day off. I took Lydia and Hope's DNA test results to the DNA testing center. She didn't remember me until I reminded her about the pacifier. I handed her Lydia and Hope's DNA test results and offered her a coffee cup with a gum wrapper. "See you in 3 weeks," I said as I left. In fact, only 2 weeks passed. This time she gave me the results over the phone. "They're a married couple, no doubt about it," she said. "Mother, father, and child." She would send me the official results by mail. Okay. I had all the information I needed, but what did I need it for? What was I supposed to do with it? All I needed to do was confirm that Weber was indeed the man Lydia had been cheating on her husband with. It took me a week to take the first step. I went to Walmart and bought paper and envelopes. I also made copies of the 2 photos of Hope and the DNA reports for Weber, Lydia, and Hope. I cut out everything from the DNA reports that could identify where they came from. I put everything in an envelope. I made sure I was wearing gloves as soon as I opened the bag with the paper and the box with the envelopes, and made copies of the photos and DNA reports. I even used self-adhesive stamps and water instead of saliva to seal the envelope. I made every effort to ensure that it could not be traced. I addressed it to Mrs. Kurt Weber at their home address. I also included Lydia's name and her parents' address because I didn't know where she was. Then I drove to the Seattle post office and dropped the letter in the mailbox. I had no idea what would happen in Killiney, Texas, where Fort Hood and the Weber family were located, when the package arrived. I certainly hoped that the package would reach Mrs. Weber and not Mr. Weber. However, I knew what I wanted. I wanted Mrs. Weber to castrate that bastard and then shove his balls down his throat. I felt sorry for the 3 children I had seen, assuming they were his, and of course for Mrs. Weber, but I didn't feel a shred of pity for Weber himself. Let him rot in hell. The news from Kalani came a little over a month ago. Aunt Lucy called me. I'm going to ask you a question and I want an honest answer, she said. I'll try. Whatever you do, it won't be enough. I want complete honesty. Is this what you and Kit did to Weber? Aunt Lucy, I don't want to sound smart, but what did we do to him? You set him up so his wife would file for divorce. Okay, I did that. Kit had nothing to do with it. I told her the truth, at least most of it. I left out Kit's part. I decided that if anyone was going to get in trouble, it would be me. You've definitely stirred up a hornet's nest. Apparently, when his wife received your package, she didn't know whose DNA it was, his or someone else's. So she did it herself. She took some of his DNA and sent it in for analysis. She also sent in the profiles of that woman and child. They matched, and that's when everything went haywire. Who was the woman he was flirting with? It was my wife, Aunt Lucy. Oh my God, I thought it might be something like that. He was brought into the office yesterday and he was in a terrible mood. He was yelling and swearing all over the base. Okay, hearing from you that his marriage is over is the best news I've heard in a long time. I just feel sorry for his family. For me, it was over. Lydia and I were divorced and Weber was on his way to divorce. I gathered all the documents Keith had given me into a folder and put it in a box with other things I no longer needed but still kept. My life went on as usual. Over the next few months, I went on a couple of dates, but nothing special happened. I still spent a lot of time with George and Marion Johnson. I lived in my apartment and sometimes invited them over for dinner, but more often I had dinner at their house and slept on their couch more than once. I had one more year of service left at Fort Lewis and I was thinking about buying a house, but the Army had other plans. I was sent to the Command and General Staff College, CNGS, in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. I stayed there for almost a year. There were many opportunities to socialize. If you were married, or if you had someone close to you. Otherwise, the choices were pretty slim. It was a long but interesting year. After graduating, I returned to Fort Hood. I was surprised because I expected to be sent overseas like 90% of my classmates. Once in Hood, I found myself in Aunt Lucy's office. How did you get back here? She asked. No idea, I replied. I know, came a voice from the past. It was the recently promoted Lieutenant Colonel Keith Franklin. He entered the office, closed the door, and we shook hands. It turned out I needed an assistant, and a major who had just graduated from CNGS was just right, so I offered him the job. Kit and I had spoken several times since arriving at the seminar, but we hadn't seen each other. I was glad to see my friend. After registering, I took 2 weeks off. The first thing I did was look for a house. Lydia and I had been saving money to buy one. I assumed she would get half in the divorce, but since she didn't show up in court, I got everything. I went to the First National Bank of Texas branch in Fort Hood and opened an account. I also arranged to have my money transferred to that bank. I told the employee who was helping me that I also needed to find a house. As soon as I said that, the branch manager walked by. He introduced himself as Dwight Randolph. We moved here about 6 months ago and settled in a new neighborhood. The houses are very nice and inexpensive. You'll get a lot for your money. With that, he went into his office and returned with the business card of the agent he worked with. I figured if she was good enough for the bank manager, she was good enough for me. I called her, and in just 3 days, I found what I was looking for. I paid more than half of the down payment, and the bank was happy to finance the rest. I started working with Kit and moved into my new home. The first things I bought were a bed, a chair, and a big TV, and a lawnmower. I spent my first night in my new home. It was getting dark outside and I didn't have any curtains or blinds. I didn't even have sheets to cover the large window in the hallway. I had just opened a beer and was holding a slice of pepperoni pizza in my hand when the doorbell rang. I had long since given up on the red meat diet Lydia had put me on. I opened the door and there was a woman standing on the doorstep. "Hello, neighbor," she said. "My name is Samantha Randolph, but everyone calls me Sammy. We live in this neighborhood. We're new here, and I just wanted to say hello, introduce myself, and let you know that if you ever need anything, just let me know. Is your wife home?" I smiled. Fred Sadler. No wife. Divorced. I saw her frown. "But don't worry, I don't throw loud, noisy parties, not even quiet, noisy ones." She smiled. We chatted for a few more minutes, then she left. The first week in my new house flew by. On Saturday morning, 3 women rang the doorbell and brought food. They also brought ideas for decorating the house. They had seen my empty house with the lights on at night and me sitting there with a single chair, a TV, beer, and pizza. They decided it was time to help me out. The ringleader was Sammy Randolph. Within a couple of hours, I had a slightly worn but nice leather couch, a dining table and chairs, and a small coffee table so the pizza wouldn't be on the floor. The ladies were about to leave when 3 small children ran into the room, chasing each other. One of the ladies, Ruth, grabbed 2 of them, and Sammy grabbed the third. Calm down, Sarah. She knelt down next to the child and brushed her blonde hair away from her blue eyes. This is our new neighbor, Major Sadler. Hello, she said confidently. My name is Sarah. I leaned toward her. Hi, Sarah, I said, looking into her piercing blue eyes. Blonde hair and blue eyes. I shook my head. How old are you, Sarah? I'm almost 7. I stood up and we all said goodbye. As soon as they left, I went to the room that was supposed to be my office, found the box I was looking for, opened it, and took out a folder. Inside were the photos I had taken. It was the same child. I hadn't paid attention to the adoptive parents' names before, but now I noticed them. Hope's adoption papers listed her adoptive parents as Dwight and Samantha Randolph. I literally fell on my butt and just sat there. What were the odds? He was the assistant manager of another bank branch in Corsicana, Texas, and then he got promoted and transferred to Killeen and Fort Hood. It was damn strange. No computer could calculate the probability of such a coincidence. Sammy and her friend basically decorated my house. It took a few weeks, and when everything was ready, we had an open house for the neighbors. Sammy invited her sister-in-law, Joni Payne, who, as it turned out, was divorced. I hadn't enjoyed female company in a long time. Joni and I hit it off right away. She was the last to leave the party, and I couldn't wait to call her the next day. We met for lunch and then had dinner with Dwight, Sammy, and Sarah. Sarah didn't come because she wanted to go hang out with her friends. Over the next few months, we were together as often as we could be. The first night we spent together was very good. We were sitting on the kitchen island when the doorbell rang. I threw on my robe and went to answer it. It was Sammy. Good afternoon, Fred, she said as she entered the house. We wanted to see, she said when she saw Joni. Well, what do we have here? She asked, walking toward her sister-in-law. Joni was sitting on a stool eating a ham and cheese sandwich. When Sammy approached her, she put down the sandwich and turned to her sister-in-law. Her robe was open, and Sammy reached to close it. Joni laughed. Modesty is not appropriate, sister. He has already seen everything. Moreover, he... Never mind, Sammy said. Don't go into details. Anyway, we wanted to ask if you'd like to go to the mall, Fred. And since you're here, Joni, Fred, I know you still need something for the house. Yes, like that awful bedspread, Joni added. What's wrong with that bedspread? I picked it out myself. That's what's wrong with it, Joni said, getting up and kissing Sammy on the cheek. I left the room and went upstairs to get dressed. When I came back, they were still discussing my bedspread. When they saw that I was dressed, they fell silent. We'd like to go to the mall, I said. If Joni gets dressed... A few minutes later, she came downstairs wearing the same clothes she had worn to dinner the night before. If this is going to be the case, I'm leaving my clothes here. I can't go shopping dressed like this. Today you can, I said, seeing her out of the house. Dwight was as surprised as Sammy when he saw his sister coming out of my house. Don't ask, Sammy said. Dwight and I sat in the front, and the 2 women and Sarah sat in the back. Joan read to Sarah, who was already asleep when we arrived at the mall. When we returned in the evening, I drove Joan home. She invited me in for a drink before bed and some lovemaking. I accepted her offer. The following weekend, Dwight and Sammy asked Joan to watch Sarah while they went out to dinner. We were in the yard watching Sarah play in the sandbox. Without looking at Joan, I said, She's a beautiful girl, isn't she? Yes. Did you know she's adopted? Did you know? Yes, they took her when she was born. According to the adoption agency, her biological mother was married, had an affair with a man she doesn't even remember, and got pregnant. Her husband was in the military. She didn't want him to find out about her affair, so she gave Sarah up for adoption. Dwight and Sammy were there to take her home. Is Sarah the name her birth mother gave her? No, her name was Hope. That's what it says on her birth certificate, but Sammy and Dwight changed it. Sarah suits her better. What happened to her birth mother and her husband? I don't know. The adoption agency is very strict about keeping cases confidential. They don't allow birth mothers access to information about the adoptive parents, and vice versa. Sarah came over and wanted to sit on Joni's lap. She leaned her head against Joni's knees and fell asleep almost immediately. A few minutes later, Joni asked me to take Sarah to her bedroom and put her to bed. It was the first time I had ever touched her, and I felt very awkward. I happily tucked her into bed. 7 months later, Joan moved in with me. A year later, we got married. We lived a very happy year until the army intervened. We were told that we were being sent to Germany for 3 years of service. We had 60 days to get there. The government is good at moving people, and we ended up in the country with all our belongings, including our car, within the allotted time. Germany is a beautiful country, and the area around Heidelberg is simply magnificent. Joni had never been outside the US, so she really enjoyed traveling around Europe. One of our first purchases was a new car. She was in seventh heaven, speeding down the Autobahn in a car built for high speeds. We went back to the US twice, once when her father and Dwight's father died. The second time was for a class reunion. Both times, of course, we saw Dwight and Sammy. We saw Sarah at the funeral, but when we got back for the reunion, she was at camp. I breathed a sigh of relief. Sarah and I never got along. I guess some internal mechanism told us both that we weren't going to be friends. That was fine with me. I understood that she had no say in her birth and didn't know who her parents were. But in my mind, she was still the daughter of my ex-wife and her lover. Joan and I tried to have children, but it didn't work out. We also talked about adoption, but nothing ever came of it. Kit and I remained friends and kept in touch from time to time. He got married, and while Joan and I were in Germany, he was stationed in Belgium, and we visited each other. We often discussed the fantastic twists and turns that had led us to where we were, and he blamed himself for everything. If he hadn't asked his brother to hack into the adoption agency's system, we would never have found out who Hope was or where she lived. 3 years later, we were ordered to move to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I was going as a newly minted lieutenant assigned to headquarters as an executive officer under the command of the post commander. Usually that position was held by a colonel, not a junior lieutenant colonel, but I didn't mind. In the military world, you don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Joan and I decided to live in government housing while we were stationed there. Our house in Killeen was rented out, and we decided to continue doing so. To help me settle in, my colleagues organized a series of briefings with representatives from various departments that support the post. One of the briefings was to be given by the postal engineer. Representatives from that department, as well as the postal engineer himself, were already in the conference room when I arrived. I sat down at a table and watched as a blue-eyed citizen stood up to begin his speech. His hair was slightly light but with a hint of gray. He introduced himself as Kurt Weber. I just stared at him. He had been talking for an hour, and I hadn't heard a word, my eyes fixed on his face. It was obvious that he was uncomfortable with me staring at him. At the end of his speech, he asked if I had any questions. "Tell me, Mr. Weber, have you ever been to Fort Hood?" "Yes, sir. I served in the engineering corps." "Did you like it there?" "Yes, sir." "Why did you leave?" "That's rather personal, sir." "You're right. I won't ask that question. I'd just like to know about the people I work with. I seem to remember a scandal in the engineering department at Fort Hood a few years ago. Do you know anything about that?" "I vaguely remember something about that. If I remember correctly, someone was cheating." "Oh yes, I just remembered something. Thanks for the information. If you need anything at headquarters, let me know. Just in case you forgot." I pointed to the badge on my uniform. "My name is Sadler. Fred Sadler. I don't want you to forget." I kept looking him straight in the eye and saw a light bulb go off in his head. And his eyes got huge. Kurt Weber's face changed color several shades, from red to pale gray. I got up and left. That afternoon, I learned that Mr. Kurt Weber had submitted a transfer request. Unfortunately for him, the request had to go through me. When I received it the next day, I wrote "Respond" in large letters and added a handwritten note. "I have plans that require Mr. Weber's experience. He will play a key role in the implementation of these plans." The next day, to the surprise of almost everyone, Mr. Kurt Weber immediately submitted his resignation. I signed it. Every day I fell more and more in love with Joni. I watched her become more beautiful and sexier. Every morning I looked in the mirror and saw only an aging middle-aged man and wondered what she saw in me, but whatever it was, I was grateful to her for it. We enjoyed our time together and the years flew by, much faster than I wanted them to. We were stationed in Alaska, and came to Killeen to visit Sammy and Dwight. On the first night, they told us about the decision they had made regarding Sarah, who was now almost 18. She had known from the beginning that she was adopted, but now she wanted to find her biological parents. Dwight and Sammy supported her decision, but the adoption agency wouldn't help them, citing the law. On the first day, all we heard about was how archaic the laws were and how they needed to be reformed, especially considering how important it is for an adopted child to know about the health of their biological parents. They decided to visit a website dedicated to DNA and ancestry, send in Sarah's DNA, and see what would happen. Sarah thought it would be great if her biological mother came to her high school graduation, but since it was only a couple of weeks away, they decided it was unlikely. That evening, Joni and I had already gone to bed when she asked, "What are you going to do?" "What about what?" "About Sarah." "What about her?" "Come on, Fred. There are no secrets in marriage, or there shouldn't be. I found your file 6 months after we got married. She can avoid the DNA test if you tell them everything you know." "Oh shit," I said. "Yes, shit. Why did you keep this a secret all these years?" "I don't know. I guess I knew how you would react, and Dwight and Sammy shouldn't know, so I kept quiet." "And now?" "But now it's become important, and you have to fix this." "Any suggestions on how I can do that?" "Just tell them the whole story, I think." "How do you think they'll take it?" "Dwight is my brother. He's just like me, so he'll be fine with it. Sammy is a wild card." "Okay. Tomorrow we'll pick up Sarah from her house and tell them." She leaned over and kissed me gently. "Do I ever tire you out?" she asked. "What a silly question," I replied. "Of course not. Why would you even ask?" "Because you haven't touched me all day." I smiled and reached for the buttons on her pajamas. "I can fix that right now." The next morning was Sunday. Sarah was picked up by her best friend, and they headed to the mall. I gathered all four of them around the table, took a deep breath, and began. I started by saying that Joni and I had packed our things before coming downstairs, so we'd be ready if they wanted to kick us out. They looked at us, and Joni shrugged. "Sarah doesn't need to give a DNA sample in case she finds her biological parents." "I know who they are," I said. The looks they gave me told me I'd better explain, so I told them the whole story. When I finished, I took a deep breath and looked around the table. Dwight just stared at me, and Sammy had tears in her eyes. After a few seconds, she stood up, walked over to me, took my hands, pulled me toward her, and hugged me. "Oh, you poor thing. All these years living with that burden and not being able to talk to anyone. No one deserves that." She hugged me again. "What do you think, Dwight?" she asked her husband. "I'm trying to calculate the probability that we'll all end up together. I don't think it's going to be a very big number." "What do we do now?" Sammy asked, returning to her chair. "I think Fred should contact his ex-wife and invite her to the ball, since Sarah wants her to come," Joni said. "Me? Why me?" I protested. "Because you started it," Dwight grinned. "But who's going to contact Weber?" "Not me," I replied, and told them about the last time I saw him. "You didn't tell me about that," Joni said. "I didn't think you knew the whole story, did you?" She leaned over and kissed me. I love this woman, I thought. Later that day, when Sarah returned, Dwight and Sammy told her about it. She was nervous and excited at the same time and wanted us to continue. The only way I know to contact Lydia is through her parents, if they're still alive, and if they still live in Mechanicsburg, and if they still have a landline. I waited until Monday morning and spoke to a private investigator. I asked him to help me find Lydia's parents and Kurt Weber. It took him 2 hours to find her parents' phone number. Weber took a little longer. I called Lydia's parents, reminded them who I was, and told them I needed to talk to Lydia. I gave them my phone number to pass on to her. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. "Hello? This is Lydia Bowman. I was given this number." "Hi, Lydia." "Fred?" "Yes, how are you?" I asked, trying to think of something clever to say, but nothing came to mind. "I'm fine, actually. How are you?" "Not bad. Lydia, I need to talk to you about something very important." "Okay, let's talk." "Not on the phone. Tell me where we can meet and we'll talk in person." "Explain this to me. We haven't spoken in years, and suddenly you have something so important to discuss that we need to talk in person." "Exactly. I'm sorry, Fred. I don't believe you." "Okay, but remember, I gave you a chance." "A chance for what? Come on, Fred, what's going on?" "Just to talk, Lydia. Call me if you change your mind." Wait, okay, damn it. We live in Vegas." "That's better." I'm flying there tomorrow and I'll call you when I land. Decide where you want to meet. The next day, we met in the lobby of the Bellagio Hotel. Apparently, she needed a lot of witnesses. Hi, Lydia. Hi, Fred. This is my husband, Roland. Roland Bowman. Hi, Roland. I turned my attention back to Lydia. I need to talk to you alone for 10 seconds. Whatever you want to say, you can say in front of Roland. Whatever you say, it concerns your hope. She turned pale. Can we talk later? Yes, he knows about her. All right, let's sit down. We found the quietest corner we could in that place. I suggest a drink. Would wine be all right? We agreed on red, and I ordered. Let's wait for it to be poured. I paid for the wine, and we all took a sip. Her name is Sarah. She's graduating in 2 weeks, and she'd like you to be there. Roland and I watched as she passed out with the wine glass in her hand, without spilling a drop. Roland took the glass from her, put it on the table, and stroked her cheeks until she came to. What did you say? I repeated myself. Then I took out the photo of Sarah and showed it to Lydia. She began to cry, touching the photo as gently as she could. She's beautiful. Where did you find her? I took the photo yesterday in her living room. Took a picture? How? Why? I told her the whole story from beginning to end. I even told her that we had tried to find Kurt Weber to invite him, but he seemed to have disappeared. She didn't know that I knew his name and was shocked a second time. At first she was stunned, but then she got angry. Very angry. Why didn't you ever tell me? Why did you hide her from me all these years? Her voice grew louder and louder. Roland jumped up. Calm down, calm down. You gave up all your rights to her. Fred is breaking the law by doing what he's doing, so calm down. She calmed down. When can I see her? At her graduation, if you want to come. Of course I'll come. Can't I see her before then? You both need time to get used to it. Don't rush it. Maybe you could come the day before? She smiled. That would be great. Maybe I'll take a picture of you, so she can see what you look like? Okay. We found a spot on the street where she could pose. When I was about to leave, she ran up to me, hugged me, and started kissing me all over my face and head. Not too demonstrative, right? Roland asked, laughing. I decided I liked him. That same day, I flew back to prepare Sarah. I showed her the photo of Lydia. She's beautiful, Sarah said. She was very nervous, but at the same time excited. For the first time in all the time I had known her, she hugged me. Thank you, Uncle Fred. Now we know where you got your beauty from, Sammy said, snuggling up to Sarah. Do you know what my biological father looks like? Sarah asked timidly. Do you know what my biological father looks like? Sarah asked timidly. Do you know what my biological father looks like? Sarah asked timidly. Do you know what my biological father looks like? Sarah asked timidly. Do you know what my biological father looks like? Sarah asked timidly. Do you know what my biological father looks like? Sarah asked timidly. Do you know what my biological father looks like? Sarah asked timidly. The three adults looked at me with wide eyes, waiting for my answer. I thought for a second before responding. All I'll say is that you got your blonde hair and blue eyes from him. All three sighed with relief. We had only taken a week's vacation, so I had to return to Alaska, but Joni stayed behind to help everyone prepare for the big day. I flew back to Alaska, promising to return 2 days before graduation. The day before I was due back in Killeen, I got a call from the private investigator. All he had been able to find out about Weber was that after leaving government service, he had taken a job as a consultant to a Middle Eastern country. Like several other American consultants, he had disappeared shortly after arriving in the country and had not been seen since. I met Lydia and Roland at the airport and drove them straight to Sarah's house. When we entered the house, she was standing in the middle of the living room. I let Lydia go ahead. They looked at each other for a long time, then Lydia spoke. I brought this for you, she said, pulling out the pacifier. It's yours. I thought you might want it back. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.